Have you ever found yourself in a cycle of overeating and then restricting and then overeating and restricting? Well, in today's episode, I'm interviewing MJ, who's a coach and helps women who are in that restrictive eating and overeating cycle to stop. So stay tuned to this week's episode where we're going to uncover some steps to get out of that vicious cycle. All right, MJ, thank you so much for being here today.
You're so welcome. I'm very excited.
So let's first introduce you to the audience. Tell us about yourself, what type of coaching you do, and how you really became an expert in this kind of coaching.
I actually work for the No BS weight loss program with Corinne Crabtree. I found her when my doctor told me that I had all the everythings, cholesterol, borderline diabetic, triglycerides, all the things. And I had listened to a couple podcasts of hers, and I had always been overweight, and nothing had ever worked. I mean, I had done them all, but something about her just made sense to me. So I joined her program. I lost 85 pounds, and I was able to keep it off. And actually have a child who has bipolar and anxiety, and the stuff that I was learning inside the membership about thought work and what is a fact and what is a thought and all of those things were really helping her. So I went to life coach school to see if I could help her a little bit more, but ended up becoming a life coach, had lost my weight, did a lot as a member inside the membership. And then I ended up starting to work for Corinne, and I've been there for about 4 years now. I'm the head coach at No BS, and Corinne always says she's helped thousands of women lose weight. And at this point, I can say the same. So, that is where all of my focus has been over the past several years, is just helping every woman lose all of her weight.
Well, congratulations. That's
Yeah.
amazing. It's
Yeah.
so fun to see other women like go through their own transformation and then it like naturally becomes your life and your purpose. And
Yeah.
it's just so beautiful how that plays out.
Yes. Yes. It is definitely my life's work. It is my passion for sure.
Yeah, so good. So, give us a brief overview because you do a lot of coaching around overeating, just like
Yes.
the overeating aspect of it, and then also not restricting. So, we're going to
Yes.
talk about that today. So, give us an overview on the understanding of overeating, what it is, and why it happens. Because I think there is sometimes confusion from women, specifically in my audience, where I'm always encouraging them to usually eat more of different kinds of foods and less of some kinds of foods and finding that balance in there. But then there's also that balance of, well, am I overeating this? Am I under eating that? Like, what is overeating? Like, how does a woman actually know she's overeating?
Yes. So overeating, a lot of times when people join our membership, they think about the full side of overeating. So you think about like that Thanksgiving, like I got to wear my stretchy pants kind of full. But overeating also can be eating when you're not hungry. So it can
Mhm.
also look like stopping by your coworker's desk and grabbing that piece of candy, or eating while you're cooking dinner, even though you're not hungry yet, or grabbing the chips like out of the bowl just because they're sitting out. So we want to be really mindful that there's two sides of overeating. So a lot of that, though, overeating when you are not hungry is habitual eating, which for a lot of people is the easiest overeating to clean up. As long as you're aware that just because it's sitting out, I go by and I grab it. A lot of people find that the easiest form of overeating to clean up. And then we have the other side when you continue to eat because it just tastes so good. Or as far as like restriction goes, I don't know, I'm never going to get this again. I don't know when I'm going to have this again. Or the I've already blown it, I may as well go ahead and finish kind of eating. Or I deserve it. Or I've had a stressful day. Or I'm just so tired, I'm not ready to go to bed yet. I'm just going to sit here and finish all of the popcorn because if not, this is the only time I get to myself. And then hormones and that sort of stuff do come into play. And a lot of times, what I think with hormones is, though, you want that certain chocolate. Being very like, the overview of chocolate, or something sweet or ice cream or whatever it is, whenever you notice that your hormones are changing at different times of the month. But because you've restricted it for so long during the month and it's the only time you let yourself have it, you tend to overeat it. And so that's what we talk about a lot in No BS, is there are no forbidden foods. So if you're allowed to have it, and I like to call it, you slap the sexy off of it. It's not just a weekend food. It's not just a Friday food. It's not just a birthday food. It's not just a when I have my period food. Then it doesn't feel so sexy. So that whenever you do let yourself have it, you're like, oh, I can have this anytime. It's not as difficult to stop.
Yes, exactly. I love that because I myself, I struggle, like I'll be totally transparent. I struggle with weekend foods where I'm like, oh, I would never be the person that orders out on a Tuesday,
Yeah.
right? But would I be the person that goes out and eats too much on a Saturday? I sure would.
Yeah.
And that's, why? Because like I feel like, oh, I would never do that on a Tuesday. That's forbidden. But on a Saturday, I can. And it's like no different at all.
Yeah. And I always tell the membership, like, there's always those certain foods or like certain things that you do, like Saturday night out, when you're like, oh, I'm really going to enjoy it. And you build it up in your head. And I always say, if you talk about foods or food experiences like it's the best lover you've ever had, you are not going to break up with them.
Right. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So let's talk about the difference between physical hunger and emotional hunger, and what are some cues that they can learn to tell them apart? Like, how do you know that you're actually hungry, and how do you know that you're eating for reasons outside of physical hunger?
Yeah. For me, and I think for a lot of our members, physical hunger starts in your body. So I notice for me, if I've got a stomach growl, I've gone way too far. But for me, I can't focus as well. Every once in a while, I even get like a little dull headache. I can't sit still very well. I want to task jump from one thing to the other. But whenever I know it's from emotion, it starts with, you need a break. Just get up and go to the kitchen, or that sure sounds good. So, for a lot of people, especially when you first start trying to identify if it's coming from your body or your head, it's a thought that will start that. Just the thought of that sure sounds good, or I wish I had, or I should go in there and grab so and so out of the kitchen. But the physical hunger does start in your body. You'll notice
Mhm.
it there first.
Do you have advice for women who can't hear their natural hunger cues? Because so many
Yes.
times, we've been conditioned to ignore our signals, especially if we're trying to lose weight. Like you should feel hungry, so just allow it to be there type of narrative. And
Yeah.
then pretty soon we don't ever trust that we can hear and honor our hunger and fullness cues. We just don't know how to do that sometimes. So like how would you tell somebody to like learn to hear their true physical signs?
Yeah, and we do talk about this inside the membership. We actually added this as a lesson now inside of our membership because it is so common for women. Your body sends you signals, and when you ignore them for so long, it's like, oh, she must not want to hear about this anymore. So I'll just stop doing that for her. And so, what you have to do is start to develop trust with yourself. And so, in those instances, you do need to time to eat. You need to set a timer and make sure that you eat not a huge meal. We're not talking about going to the buffet every few hours, but eat a piece of fruit, eat some string cheese, eat a small bag of chips, even. It doesn't matter what it is, but just starting to develop that trust with your body that, like, oh, she is going to feed us on the regular. So maybe I can start to send her those signals again. It's almost like you have to wake those back up because it is, like you said, I mean, we have all just ignored hunger and ignored our body's cues for so long. Our body is finally like, I guess you don't want to hear them. You're not listening to them anyway. So I'll just stop sending those your way. And so it has to know I'm listening to you now. I'm gonna honor you now. I'm gonna start paying attention to you. If you could please just start sending me those again. So it is very, very common for especially women who have dieted their entire lives to come in and be like, I don't even hear it anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, it's so easy to mindlessly and habitually eat too on the other side of that
Yeah.
because you don't actually know what hunger feels like. You don't know should you be eating or shouldn't you eat. You're just eating because the food is there, not because your body really needs it right now.
Yeah. And we get into preemptive eating as well because it's like we've had to starve ourselves in diets for so long. We're scared to be hungry because we've had to sit with it. and not been able to honor it and all that. So you're talking about like grazing and snacking and kind of
Mhm.
eating your way through the day.
Mhm.
A lot of women do that because they are scared to death that, like, because the only experience they've had with hunger is when I get hungry, I'm going to have to sit with it. I'm going to have to be miserable to the point of nausea, still can't eat. And they're like, I don't want to feel that because when I feel it, I know it goes terribly wrong. And so they do get into this habit of just constantly eating to avoid feeling hunger because it's not been a good place for them before.
Yeah, exactly. So I have a story about that. I did bodybuilding about like 6, 7 years ago. I don't remember how long it was now. But at the time of my last competition, basically the last part of it is like you're just literally starving your body to get yourself lean
Hmm.
enough to go on stage. And my body had a really hard time with that one. And after that show, after I got through it, and whenever I would become hungry after that, it was literally a whole nervous system visceral reaction that my body would flip
Hmm.
out if I was hungry. And I felt very fearful of that
Yeah.
feeling because my body's like, hey, remember when you almost killed us trying
Yeah.
to do that thing?
No, yeah.
Like, this is bad. Don't feel like this. And so it was so easy for me to go into just overeating and like binging because I was so fearful of feeling
Yeah.
hungry. And I would overeat all the time because I just was so afraid of feeling hunger. And also like hunger, like we don't have to feel hunger to lose weight, but we want to remember that hunger is just a sign. And right, it's just
Yeah.
communication. We don't have to be afraid of it. It is okay if you feel it and you're in control of that feeling too,
Yeah.
like
And
when
it's
it
your
does happen.
body advocating for itself.
Yeah.
I'm running low on fuel. It's just like when your light comes on in your car.
Yeah.
It's not, nothing terrible has gone wrong. It's like, hey, you may want to look for a gas station pretty soon. Hunger is the same in your body. Like your tank is getting low and you need to, start thinking about where you're going to pull off and go get something to eat.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So how can women build a healthier relationship? Because we talked about going out to eat like on Saturday nights or social events or like really like sexifying that. How do you build a good relationship with doing that and having those like fun events with food and celebrations? How would you say to balance those things?
Yeah, I mean, I think it does like it's very difficult in the moment to create that relationship. Like I never let myself have these things, but I'm going to go to this party and like use like amazing thoughts and visualization. It does come down to look at learning that food is not good or bad. It is food. And sometimes we choose to have cake and sometimes we choose to have broccoli. And there's nothing wrong with either one of them. And when you're feeling not stressed and not under pressure of an event, go ahead and go to their store. They sell individual pieces of cake. You don't have to buy an entire birthday cake. You can go and get a piece of cake and sit down and enjoy it and learn that you can stop at one piece of cake so that when you do go to a party and there's an entire cake and somebody's offering you the second piece, you've had practice with just having one piece of cake. Or, when we don't ever have pasta and then you finally go out and you have pasta and then you eat all the pasta and then it's Saturday and you're like, well, I'll just start over again on Monday because I've already blown it. And then you eat your way through Sunday as well. Have some pasta on a Wednesday when
Mm-hmm.
you just get off work and pick up some pasta and have it. Just to develop that relationship with those foods. So when you do see them at a party or when you go out or whatever, you've already shown yourself that you do know how to control yourself around those foods. And then the other thing you can do is set up protocols for yourself when you go to those places. So for me, I only eat on a plate. Like I just don't. I'm not going to graze. I'm not going to stand it's the South. We all have islands. We all stand around and like graze and when we go to Bunko and all that kind of stuff and I just get a plate first because for me, that slows me down. It keeps me from just mindlessly grabbing something. So I just made a rule with myself that I only eat off a plate. And
Mm-hmm.
that helps me in those situations because you do get distracted. Maybe you've had a glass or two of wine and you need some of those things in place to help like keep you honest, basically, and help you stay on your path toward what you really want.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great idea of that cake thing. Like go to the store and just buy one piece of cake. Cause that
Mhm.
also, I tend to hear like an objection of, but I never get to have this thing. Like, so if it's a birthday, I never get to have cake. So then we overeat the cake and we let the cake
Yeah.
sit there on the counter. And every time we walk past, we have some cake.
Yeah.
And that also like disproves that no, you can have cake whenever you want. Just go to the store and buy it. Like that's
Yeah.
a thought that you're trying to kind of like allow yourself to eat more cake and be a victim to the cake versus just being like, no, you can actually have cake whenever you want. Just go to the store. And also you can just buy one piece.
Yes, you
Yeah.
absolutely can.
Yeah.
And then the other thing you can think about too, we use something inside of No BS called the velvet rope. So, what foods make it past the velvet rope? So,
Mhm.
is it like, the grocery store? We do have Publix has a great cake, but, or is it like from the special bakery place? Like, that is my cake. If I'm going to eat cake, that's what I'm going to eat. Like, we have one coach inside of No BS, it's her French fries, is hers. So, they have to be a certain cut to make it past her velvet rope. Like I am not going to spend my time with no janky French fries. Like, if they're like not steak cut or whatever she
Yeah.
likes. But that's the other thing that you can do for yourself. Like, is it really worth it? Like this cake's been sitting out here for 30 minutes. Everybody's been, coughing and sneezing on it. Do I want that or do I want to go to a bakery and get a cake that is absolutely amazing?
Yes, I do that with pizza. So like I have kids, my kids love pizza. So
Hmm.
there are some places that they want to order pizza from that is not the pizza I'm putting in my body. I'm not doing it.
No.
But there are some places when I'm like that pizza is actually worth coming in. Like
Yeah,
I know I
I'll
may
bet
not
it is.
feel great tomorrow or tonight because I have this pizza, but it's a little bit more worth it than some pizzas that do make me feel miserable. And when I'm eating it, I'm like, it's just no, no, thank you.
It's not even that good. I'm
Just
that.
because it's there. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, so we're going to talk a little bit about restrictive eating and how to basically not overeat, but also not restrict your food. How does somebody know that they are restricting their eating? Like for those who think like this is normal eating or this is restrictive eating, how do you know the difference?
Usually when you've cut out an entire group of food,
Mm-hmm.
um, that like when you're avoiding one particular thing, that is typically restriction. And so it's just inviting all of those foods into your diet in limit. Some of them you're not going to want to have cake every day. You're not going to want to have pizza every day, but just in some limited quantities. But whenever you start to think that this is bad, I can't have this. I'm not allowed to have this. That is when you're moving more into the restrictive eating piece of it.
Yeah. Okay. And then how does that contribute to overeating?
Oh, such a good question. So, usually when you join a diet, it's usually out of frustration because you've overeaten one thing. So, you've cut out a whole food group, typically flour, sugar, carbs, whatever it is, you cut it out totally. And then you walk around for a couple of weeks and you're like, no, can't have that. That sounds good, but I can't have that. And then your friend offers you a piece of chocolate and you're like, well, I'm on a diet. I can't have it. And then you just see it. And then all of a sudden you see it everywhere. Like when you're wanting to buy a new car and then that's
Mhm.
all you see. Like, so if you've restricted pasta or bread or whatever it is, that's all you see. Everybody's eating bread, everybody's eating pasta. And then finally, you're like, I can't take it anymore. I have just got to eat this thing. And you also think, as soon as I eat this, I'm going to buckle down again, but I've just got to have it this one time. Then you eat the thing and you're like, well, I don't know when I'm ever going to have it again. Never going to be able to have this. It's going to be so long. I might as well go ahead and get it out of my system. I might as well go ahead and finish it all so that I don't have to look at it anymore or whatever the thought is that you have. And then you way overeat it. And then it gets put again in the category of food I can't control myself around.
Yes.
And then
Yeah.
you get back on the loop of I can't have it because I can't control myself around it. And then you can handle it for so long. And then the next thing you know, you're like, this is too hard. I can't do this anymore. And then you overeat. And for a lot of women, what we find, I was talking about this like with weekend eating, it's like, well, I've already blown it. And it is the 16th. I mean, the first of the month is in like less than 2 weeks. I'll just start back on the first. Then everything that you did at the beginning of the month and you lost a little bit of weight, then you spend 2 weeks overeating to get to the golden first of the month or the Monday or whatever it is. And then you've not only gained back what you lost, you've added a few of their friends have come along. And then you just keep getting in that cycle over and over and over again.
Yeah, yep, for sure. Um, my husband is the notorious, like, I'm just gonna eat it all so I don't have to deal with it
Yes.
anymore. So I love to bake because I just like the experience of it. Um, but I don't because he will literally eat it all
Mhm.
so he doesn't have to deal with it. That has a lot to do with his own food issues. Like
Right.
not being able to handle like just the discomfort of allowing that sweet food to sit on the counter without consuming it and like just
Yeah.
let it be there. It's fine. It can be there without eating it all. You're
Yeah.
in control over it.
Yeah, I mean, I have since I found no BS. I would never have thrown some away or whatever, but like I've thrown things away and I mean, it's been like, 6 years, I guess now. And it's still every time I throw something away, I'm like, oh my God, I let that sit out and I didn't eat it. And
Yeah.
I'm still amazed. It still
Yeah.
amazes me every time I do it.
Yeah, I always tell my clients because they're afraid to throw stuff away that they don't actually want to be eating because it's wasteful. And I always tell them, like, well, you can choose where you're wasting it. Do you want to waste
Mhm.
it in your body? Because it's still wasteful when you're eating it and you're not hungry and also you don't want it. Or you can waste it in the garbage. Which one would be better for you?
Or in the Corinne, I'll use the Corinne verbiage. In the trash or on your ass. One or the other.
Yes.
That is what Corinne would say.
Yeah, that
Um,
is good.
yeah, and I always think about like whenever you're talking about wasting, and you eat it, you're just wasting your weight loss goal. You're just
Yeah.
wasting going to bed proud of yourself. You are
Yeah.
just wasting the ability to prove to yourself that you can actually do something that you've wanted to do for your whole entire life. And like, I don't want to waste those opportunities. I would rather
Right.
waste some food.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like one of the things that I say too is like food has a purpose. Food's
Mhm.
purpose is here to nourish you, but it's not here to overdo anything. And so if you are not using food for nourishment, that would be considered wasteful. So it's also like
Yeah.
how we think about wasting stuff. Wasting doesn't just mean in the landfill or in the garbage can. It also is like how we're using it can be used or wasteful as well.
Yeah, and I don't want to throw away the experience when it's something. So my daughter bakes as well, and she found one of my grandmother raised me. She found one of her recipes before she went away to college, and she was like, "Oh, I found Susie's recipe. I'm gonna make it." And I was sitting in my office working, and I could smell the cake baking. And I was immediately taken back to my grandmother's house. Like
Mm,
there I
mhm.
was. I mean, I could almost like hear her in the kitchen. It was just that smell took me back. And she made the cake and it was absolutely gorgeous. And when I took a piece of it that night, um, I almost had an experience with my grandmother. Like it was
Oh,
like
yeah.
she was there with me. And I had cake for dinner for 3 nights. But I sat down and I enjoyed that experience and that time with my grandmother, who has been gone for a long time. And but I that food nourished my soul.
Yeah.
And I allowed it to nourish my soul and I enjoyed it. Um, so I think there's other ways that you can nourish yourself. But if you're just standing over there like, well, this is Susie's cake, and then you just, I'm like shoving it down, I don't get to spend that time with her and that memory of her. And
Right.
so, like, I think that there are so many ways that we can nourish ourselves. We can nourish ourselves with memories and just those experiences that we have. And then we can fuel it with nourishment as well. But I think that food is also there to give us those experiences. And we need to enjoy those experiences. And it wasn't the cake, though. It was never the cake. The cake was the
Mhm.
catalyst.
Mm.
But it really was that moment to sit down and remember my grandmother through that vehicle of the cake. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, I think that that's the other thing we always need to remember is there are cultural foods and there are foods from our past and foods that bring back memories that are super special to us. And maybe it's not like diet food and it's not like
Yeah.
food that's going to help us lose weight. But if we can learn how to really enjoy those foods and savor them and, take them in as what they are, like they're a part of our past and a part of our history and a part of our culture, um, then you don't have to overeat them in that way that you did before. Because the memory, I can sit down without the cake. I can still have a memory with my grandmother, but that was such a powerful time for me.
Yeah. And then also, like when you honor it like that, when you honor that experience like that, you don't have to feel guilt or remorse afterwards because you
No,
think you ate the wrong food.
that's
Because, yeah,
exactly right.
maybe it's not going to help you lose weight, but that's
Mm-mm.
okay. There's no guilt or remorse because you
No,
had that experience with the food.
that's exactly right. That's
Yeah.
exactly right.
So when it comes to overeating, going back to that, what are some helpful things that you can tell the audience on how they can set themselves up to prevent overeating patterns?
Yeah. So a lot of times, like I was talking about those habit eats, sometimes it's just put them in a different, put those foods in a different place. If you always have like Hershey Kisses sitting out and you always go by and grab it, put them away. If you notice that you tend to overeat certain things like chips or whatever, as soon as you bring them into the house, pre-portion them so that you're not just sticking your hands into a bag of food or whatever it is. And then the other thing I think is so important to remember is we're going to overeat sometimes. And we just do the best we can. And then sometimes we do overeat. We talk a lot about to our members about eating on a smaller plate, especially
Mhm.
for the Clean Plate Club people that, you're like, you got your card, it's in your purse, you carry it around with you. Eat on a smaller plate so that you're not over serving yourself. So you do give yourself that pause. And we also do something inside the membership called the halftime method. Eat half of your food and just take a pause. Check in with your
Yeah.
body. See how you're doing. And so that those are some of the things that we teach inside of No BS, and they are so very helpful because a lot of times when you are we call it momentum eating, like you're in the moment, it's very difficult to stop yourself. If you've always cleaned your plate or you've always reached down into the bag of chips until they were gone, and then you're like, oh crap, what happened? Or you have always just made the popcorn and eaten the whole bowl. How can you set yourself up for success to kind of break that momentum that you find yourself in a lot of times?
Yeah. Okay, that's super helpful. And then how about what do you not do after overeating? What are things that you want to avoid? Because it's going to happen. Right?
Yeah.
We're humans with human minds. We're going to overeat at times. What are the things that somebody should like don't do that after overeating?
So I want to tell everybody that is listening, if you are currently trying to lose weight, if you're overweight, I'm going to give you a light bulb moment. Normal eaters overeat sometimes.
Hmm.
It happens. People who you look at that you think they're so thin they can eat anything they want, they overeat sometimes. And it is okay. And the difference between a person who has weight to lose, I still do this to myself too sometimes because in my mind, I'm still, overweight. Because there's a lot of those thoughts that just keep popping back up for me. But when I overeat, I first have to remind myself that everybody does from time to time. It's not a big deal. And a lot of times, what happens, you need to remind yourself, I don't need to overeat because of this, because that's what we find so often. I've overeaten and now I feel so bad that I might as well just keep on overeating.
Yeah.
So, oh, you do not need to overeat over and overeat. And you overeat for so many different reasons. First, you got caught up in conversation. Like life
Mhm.
happens and you do overeat. It is normal. It doesn't mean anything has gone wrong, and you are one decision away from getting right back on, on your weight loss or on your plan or overeating at your next meal. The other thing is you do not punish yourself with
Yeah.
overeating. That is no reason to be like, well, now I can't eat for the rest of the day. No, you
Yeah.
just wait for your body to say, I'm getting empty, fuel me, and then you give it some gas. It is not because we've used it for punishment for so long. We have got to stop doing that.
Yeah, a lot of my listeners will go right into over restriction then and
Yes.
not eat for the rest of the day. And then the next day they'll try fasting. A lot of time fasting is the thing that I'm going to try to do because if I give myself a very strict rule on don't eat between either these hours or for this amount of time, I will feel secure in that decision. It'll feel easier for me to do. And also it feels kind of like a repentance for
Yeah.
my sinning of
Yes.
overeating.
But that's why I think it's so important for people to understand that even normal people overeat, normal
Yeah.
eaters overeat, because it's not something that overweight people do because they're bad. It's something
Right.
that humans do because they're human.
Mhm.
And so I think that whenever you tell someone that, it almost gives them the freedom to be like, wait a minute, it's not because I'm overweight and I screwed up. No, it's just because you're human. But then I love what you talked about. Like, I'm not going to eat the next meal, or I'm going to fast, or I'm going to whatever. Then what have you done? You've moved from one overeat into that restrict, and then we know what's going to happen after that. The binge cycle
Mhm.
comes after that. And I'm not talking about
Yeah.
like typical binge, but overeating because you
Mhm.
restrict, you can't stand it, and then you eat all the things. So it's still putting yourself on that loop that you've been on for so long,
Yeah, you just stay stuck in it over and over.
over and
And for
over.
some reason, we think that, this restriction is gonna make sense. This isn't gonna backfire. This is gonna be the next best step. We don't think about like, oh, this is just preparing myself to overeat again after this
Yes.
restriction.
Well, because if you're not working on the root cause of why you overate in the first place,
Mhm.
or working on all of the thoughts that you have about food and the relationship that you have with food, if you're not working on that, then you're the same person going through that cycle. Nothing has
Yeah,
changed. And so and your brain loves a good habit. It does what it's always known. And unless you're working on changing that, it's just gonna be like, oh, girl, I got you. Oh, you overate? You know what we're gonna do? We're gonna starve ourselves. And then we're going to get a reward at the end of like, we're going to get to eat all the things. I love this cycle. Let's go. And so you find yourself back on there, and your brain gets you on there because at the end, it's going to get the reward of all the food. It's like,
yeah,
I've been here. We've done this 100 times. I'm putting this on repeat because I got you. I know how to
yeah,
do this. And
yeah,
so you have to insert thought work. You have to insert some of these habits, like I talked about, like, whatever, to in order to get your brain kind of going in a different direction.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Okay. Well, this is a great conversation. I loved all of your expertise and your insight on overeating and restriction. Where can the listeners find you?
So I work for Corinne Crabtree, like I said, at No BS Weight Loss. So you can find more about our program, and we have a membership, all the things at nobsweightloss.com. And then she also has a podcast called Losing 100 Pounds with Corinne, and you can find it on, all the places.
Okay, very cool. Well, thank you so
Yeah,
much for being here.
thank you so much.